Alrighty, good evening, everyone. Welcome to week one of the Principles of Commercial Law tutorials. Really awesome to have you guys with me this evening, and really awesome to have everyone who's watching this recording later on. This is hopefully a really great, really interesting unit as a third or final year elective. It's really designed to bring together a lot of the knowledge that you've acquired throughout the past few years of your studies, and really sort of build on the skills more than anything that you've been working towards in your studies. So something that I think is really important to say.
Sorry, Jacob, you froze there for a few seconds.
Oh no. Okay. We're off to a great start. I'll rewind a sec and just say it's really great to have you all along this evening. Hopefully the internet holds out. And just to really say by way of introduction, and this is something that I've said in some of the pre-recorded material as well, is that this subject really, in terms of principles of commercial law, we're really focusing on the principles as being the cornerstone of what is important to study, and the cornerstone of skills that you develop to go out and practice, if that's the sort of the legal pathway that you choose. And the main reason, there's two reasons why we do that. The first, of course, is that commercial law is such a huge subject. There's no way that we can cover everything. But if we focus on the principles and the core skills, then you'll be really well equipped to deal with whatever challenges come your way in the future. So that's both of those points merged into one there. These tutorials in particular are going to be a really important chance for you guys to apply the skills that are really important for this unit. So each week, this week's a little bit different, but each week you'll have problems that are uploaded on Moodle, and we're going to spend most of the time in these tutorials running through those, talking not only about the legal issues that arise, but really focusing on the skills involved in analyzing the problems, pulling out the nuances of the particular issues, thinking about how you can really critically apply your understanding, and then converting those into some really practical skills around legal drafting and legal writing and things like that. And that will really help prepare you for the two assessment tasks, which are both letters of advice to client. So these tutorials, week in, week out, are going to be practice for the assessment, really. And so by the time you hit those pieces of assessment, you should be really comfortable with what's expected of you, and you'll be more than equipped with the skills to do really well on those assessments. So each week in these tutorials, I'll start off with a quick kind of recap of some of the key points. It's not intended to be, a complete summary or anything like that, but really what I'll be doing is I'll be drawing out perhaps a couple of points that are really important to emphasize, or a more practical take on particular problems or complexities that arise in that week's topic. I'll then allocate a little bit of time for questions about the unit as a whole or about the particular topic. And then we'll dive straight into those tutorial problems and spend most of the time working through those. So before we do get underway this evening, just a few quick bits of housekeeping, I suppose. And in particular, the first thing and the most important thing is a sort of, I guess, a bit of a ground rule in terms of respect. You can, of course, expect of me that I'll treat you all with respect, your opinions and everything like that. I want these tutorials to be a safe space where you feel comfortable sharing your ideas, and so that we can have a really rigorous discussion about the tutorial problems. I want you to feel comfortable to, put an idea out there, even if it is, perhaps a little bit creative. I want us to be able to discuss those perspectives and those different ideas. And, commercial law is not an especially controversial topic. So I don't anticipate that being a problem anyway. But I think it is really important that I do say straight at the outset that, you know, I'm here to support you guys and guide you guys through this unit. You know, I'm not here to judge, and I'm certainly not here to judge people who are having a go. I applaud that, absolutely. That flows into the sort of the second point, which is please make sure that you're engaging with this unit and participating. That includes attending tutorials. For those of you who are watching this as a recording, if you can make it, I do really appreciate you guys showing up. You get so much more out of being able to participate in the discussion rather than just watching the discussion after the fact. And I appreciate that, you know, people have busy lives. I've seen that the recording's just gone again. So I was just saying, you know, I appreciate people have busy lives. Not everyone can attend, but if you can, please absolutely do try and make the effort. If you can't, or even if you can and you want other ways to engage, always feel free to reach out and ask me any questions that you have. There's the discussion boards on Moodle. There's Microsoft Teams, which I sort of envisage as being a bit more of a dynamic, more open-ended space where we can talk about principles of commercial law, but also some broader themes and ideas. And yeah, I mean, really, the assessment timelines for this unit are quite tight. And that's designed to sort of simulate, you know, timelines in legal practice, but they're comfortable timelines if you're staying on top of the material week after week. If you try and, you know, wait for the assignment to be released and then try and learn anything and write your answer and submit it, you will be under the pump. So I'm saying, you know, make sure that you're engaging as soon as possible and as consistently as possible, and that'll set you up to do really well. Last thing, this tutorial, of course, is recorded. So, you know, and uploaded to YouTube and to Moodle and everything. So, you know, you guys are more than aware of that. The chat, I generally try to give people credit when they say something in the chat. I generally try and credit them for that. I'll just quickly say, you know, Bob, Sue, great response, whatever. But if you don't want to be mentioned, that's fine as well. I can keep comments that are in the chat a bit more confidential or anonymous. Just include a little notation beforehand if you'd like me to, you know, keep things a bit more private, I suppose. That's it from me. I suppose it's a good time to hand over to you guys to ask, you know, firstly, are there any questions that you have about the unit or about these tutorials and how they're going to work? Yeah, okay, that's good. Nothing there. That's good to see. And I suppose then that flows into a bigger sort of almost getting to know you exercise, I suppose, in the sense that I'm interested to know, and I'm happy for you guys to put this in the chat or to, you know, say it over the microphone. I'm interested to know where you guys are at in terms of your studies. It's a third year elective, but that doesn't mean that everyone is in their third year, and that's totally fine. But I'm interested to know, mainly from the perspective of, are you guys close to graduating and have an eye to kind of what comes next? Because if there's enough of that around and if there's interest in that, then I'm more than happy to start tailoring some of the content towards that as well. Final semester, fantastic. Congratulations, Amy. It's really exciting. And, you know, broad perspective, nothing turns on that, obviously, but just in terms of thinking about some of the practical skills and the way that we start thinking about, you know, what's this going to look like in, say, a law firm or something like that. There are sort of room to go that extra step if people are interested in those types of things.
I'd be interested in that, Jacob, for sure.
Yep. Okay. Fantastic. So Sujavan has said completed 21, enrolled in 2. one subject left in term 1 of next year, I assume. So that's really good. Natalie, 2 terms left. So yeah, lots of people very much with the finish line in sight. So that's really great to hear. And so yeah, absolutely. And we spend a fair bit of time in week 12 really talking about where to from here, and what are some of the bigger future questions for commercial law in the future. So there's plenty of scope right at the end to talk about some of this stuff, but there's also scope to add to it as we go. 6 units to go, 10 subjects left. So yeah, we're all really close. That's fantastic. Congratulations, guys. It's it's a big undertaking, and you're nearly there, which is really good. And I suppose as well, I'll wait while the connection resets. The other thing that, in terms of, I guess, getting to know you, is, does anyone currently work in, I suppose, a legal setting?
I work for a firm.
Work for a firm? Yeah.
I work for Cause Chambers Westgarth. So particularly interested in commercial law.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, you'll be more than prepared for this unit. And again, the reason I ask is that, it's good to, I have my own perspective and background in commercial law, but it's good to sometimes hear from your peers as well about what their experiences have been, whether currently or, some people might do a bit of work experience over the holidays or something like that. So, where there is that experience and those perspectives, if you feel comfortable sharing those as we go, please, of course, do feel free to.
I started a commerce degree before my law degree. So one of the first law subjects that we did was commercial law, which covered off a fair bit of what this one does, as well as insurance law and bankruptcy. So of course, that was quite interesting.
Yeah. And it is interesting, the differing, the subject matter is obviously the same or very similar, but the emphases in terms of, I suppose, subjects within a law degree versus subjects within a more businessy kind of degree, the emphases are interesting and sometimes different as well, which is kind of cool. Private and government experience as well. Fantastic. And I mean, yeah, you have all, got lives, you've all got experiences that you bring to your studies, and it's great if we can harness those and share those with everyone else. I think I found in teaching this subject before that that's one of the really great things about this unit, is that we are a bit of a smaller cohort. There is sort of scope to do a bit more of that sharing and learning from each other's perspectives as well. All that said, we should probably get into, I suppose, some of the more substance of this week's topic. I will just start off with a very brief summary and a few comments about the filler method. So facts, issues, law, application. And really, I think it's important to spend this week kind of talking about that in a bit of detail, because it really does shape the way that you approach these problems and approach practice beyond now. And so obviously the filler method takes facts as critical. And, if you have two takeaways from this week, the first needs to be just this absolute focus and emphasis on the facts. It's so important to really pay critical and close attention to the facts. And the reason I kind of harp on about that a bit is that, our legal training really gets you to focus on the law and the legal issues. And of course, those are really important. But ultimately, what grounds all of this is the facts. And so it does take a bit of resetting sometimes to actually take a step back and think about the facts as being central. So that's the first thing I would really want you to take away from this. The second thing, obviously issues and law are important too, but the second thing is that application is really important too. And in particular, thinking about one, good practice and good practice in law, but two, getting good grades for this unit, your application of the law to the facts and your critical legal skills, the nuance that you can bring to the assessment, that's really critical to distinguishing between some of those good grades. So if you're hoping to do well in this subject, really focusing on application is that's the most important thing. So facts and application I put at the sort of the top. Obviously, you need a good knowledge of the law and able to identify the law and identify the issues, but it's about going that next step and really recognizing the importance of facts and application as an extension of that. The other thing that's important to sort of talk about and think about in terms of filler is that it's more of a thought process than a structure for an answer. It's about, you use filler when you're reading through a problem, reading through a factual scenario, but you're not necessarily structuring your written answer in terms of facts, issues, law, application. And the reason I say that is because, and it's more a problem with IRAC, I find, than filler, but filler, it can run into the same problems as well, is that it breaks up the flow of your answer and your response, where when you let things kind of flow a bit more naturally, your analysis is much better because it ties directly back to the issues and the laws that you've identified. When you break it down into the separate kind of subheadings, it does actually, it breaks up your thinking as well. And you lose that really nice natural flow that's important to constructing a legal narrative. So filler is a really, really useful and important thought process for analyzing and thinking about your answer, but I'm not recommending that you use it to structure your answer. Having said that, let's turn to our first kind of tutorial question for this week, which is about filler. What do you see as the strengths of the filler method compared to IRAC or those other sort of similar processes? As a new approach to answering legal problems, what concerns or questions do you have about filler? So, I recognize that this is not necessarily a way that you've been trained to think. So it's good to get those concerns and questions that you might have out in the open so that we can address them at the very beginning of the unit. And what information do you think you would need in order to use filler in an assessment question? So maybe we start with the positives first. What do you see as the strengths of filler?
I think this more closely replicates what you would actually do in practice, whereas IRAC I find is less like how I would structure an advice piece to a client, for example. So I thought that this was a little bit more closely aligned to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And I rip on IRAC a lot, but it does have its place, especially in kind of early years of study, to get you thinking about the content of the subjects and what are the issues, what are the laws. It's got its place as you sort of start out in your legal journey, but by the time we get to the end of studies, we start to think about how do these skills work in practice, or whatever you might choose to do with your law degree. We do need to kind of outgrow IRAC a little bit, and filler is sort of the step along the way to that. Absolutely. Anyone else? Other thoughts?
I think it's more aligned also with that whole client interviewing process. Like, I mean, if you don't get the facts from the client, then you kind of are left with nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thinking about how do you, and we, in your studies, we obviously give you a factual scenario, so you get those facts, but yeah, in practice you do actually have to try and extract those yourselves, and it's not always as straightforward. Oh, here's all the relevant information, away you go. It is a process, and so you need a sort of a thought map to match that process. Absolutely. Other thoughts on the strengths of the filler method? That's cool. So let's, I suppose, move on to some of the limitations or the concerns that you might have about filler. Where do you think it might sort of fall short or be less useful, perhaps?
Sometimes you might not have all the facts to be able to draw your conclusion. So therefore you may have to conclude without having all the facts at hand.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point just in general. You know, we don't always have the full story. It's also a useful thing to note. And I'm trying to think whether it appears in the study guides or anything, and it may not. So I'll say it now, and I apologize if it's repeated information. But something that we do that's a little bit different in this unit compared to some of the other units, and especially compared to some of the early years, is that there might be some gaps in the factual scenario. You know, not huge things. I give you enough information to know what you're doing, but there will be bits of information that you think you will want to know. You'll have enough to kind of point you to the relevant issues and laws, but there might be a little bit more information that you think, if we knew this, we could be a bit more certain in our answer. If we knew this particular thing, that would really help us, decide which way to go or how to proceed or something like that. And there is absolutely room in the assessment answers for you to acknowledge that and note that. And I've got sort of an example question up on Moodle that we'll talk about in a little bit as well. So I'll point that out in a little bit more detail there. But yeah, absolutely. Acknowledging that the fact, your understanding or your knowledge of the facts won't always be complete is a really important skill to have and to learn. What might be some of the other concerns or questions you have about filler?
Not so much a question, but it goes back to similar sort of fact reliance, and that is the credibility of the actual source that is supplying the facts. So is that going to actually lead us up the garden path, or is it going to actually lead us to the facts that are required because of the credibility?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I think we'll revisit that one in relation to the second question, which sort of, talks about some of the nuances and intricacies of facts. So great answer. We'll come back to that one for sure. Any other thoughts, or I might call up the example answer if there's not any other comments. So this is up on Moodle. So I won't go through the whole thing now, but I will just sort of point out a few things that are relevant. I'll just adjust it so you can see it a little bit better. So we've got, and this is a problem of the kind that you'll find in the tutorials and in your assessment, but broadly, we've got a manufacturing company who engages another company to design, supply, and install a robotic plant. There's problems. After installation is complete, they find that the system's unreliable, and we have to advise CWIS in respect to the Sale of Goods Act. Now, we talk about Sale of Goods Act in week 3, so don't worry about the content of this answer for the moment. But more what I want to do is sort of set out the way that you use filler as a thought process to construct an answer. And your assessment answer will be a little bit different because this one's not structured as a letter of advice. I will be giving an example of those in a couple of weeks' time. But really what I want to draw your attention to here is the way that we use filler as a thought process and then convert that into an answer. So thinking about the gaps in our factual knowledge potentially having implications for the conclusion, one thing that's important to note is that you should have a conclusion still, even if it is a little bit tentative. So you can say, you can hedge a little bit, but if you hedge too much, you're not actually communicating to me that you've critically analyzed the problem. What's important is to still come up with a conclusion, even if you recognize that, nothing's a guarantee in this space. So CWIS will most likely to be able to recover. That's the kind of tentative but still clear conclusion that I'd be looking for. The other thing that's interesting to think about in terms of gaps in the facts, and this is sort of what I was saying about, there's room to acknowledge that there might be more facts that you need to know, is that yes, you should definitely identify where there are gaps, but you need to be clear and really as precise as you can about what you're looking for and why that's important. So it's what I wouldn't want to see is, you just go, okay, well, facts are important. There's so many things we don't know about these people. We need to know, their entire life story, where they were born, how old they are, blah, 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 everything. That doesn't tell me anything. Instead, what I'm really looking for is some really clear, specific bits of information and why they matter. So, for example, don't just say, oh, well, we want to see the contract document. What are you looking for in the contract document? Why would that matter? That's a much better way of showing to me as the marker that you understand what's going on here and that you can critically analyze the facts that you do have and the facts that you're missing. The other thing that really speaks to, I suppose, a critical analytic mindset is being able to sort of put yourself in the other party's shoes as well. It's not enough just to think about, okay, well, I've got this client and this is what is in their interest, or this is what they're hoping to get out of it. So these are the issues that they're having. These are the laws that support their position. This is the way the facts that support their position. That's all well and good. But you also need to have a think about, okay, well, there's two sides to this issue. What are the other side going to say about this? What are the other side going to argue in relation to the facts? What facts support their position? And being able to have a bit of complexity and nuance, and this is why I said, the application is so important, is because as a broad generalization, thinking about, the difference between maybe a credit and a distinction and a high distinction. Yes, you've been able to tell me the law and how it might apply, but if you can go that extra step and show me, well, here's what the other side's probably going to say, and here's what would support their point of view, but we can counter that. We can say these other things that will strengthen our position and weaken theirs. That's where you really show me that you've got such a good grasp of what's going on here. And that's a great way to show your critical analysis skills. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Again, just being really specific about the facts and bringing the facts into the center of your argument to talk about how they support the argument, how they support your application and interpretation of what's going on. Similarly, being specific in your discussion of the law. It's not enough at this sort of third year level to think about just saying, oh, well, the Sale of Goods Act applies or something like that. It's being really specific and careful with, the pinpoint sections, or, if a particular judgment is relevant, things like that. It's those little details that do really count and that are important here. Giving alternatives, exploring all the options, and thinking through perhaps some of those consequences is a really important way of showing that you've thought about this critically as well. You're not just thinking, okay, here's the law, here's what it says, that's it. You're going that extra step and thinking about, okay, if we think about this particular application, if we think about this particular pathway, where does that lead us? So that was quite, brief. And as I said, this document is up online for you to go through with a bit more time and in a bit more detail. But I did just want to sort of highlight that, the way that you get to all these positions, the way that you are able to think specifically about what facts are missing and why they're important, the way that you are able to develop a really nuanced appreciation for what your side's argument is and what the other side's argument is by putting facts and application really as your priorities. Obviously, you've got to have that understanding of the law to identify the issues and to identify the relevant provisions and cases and things like that. That's non-negotiable, but it's putting facts and application back into the center that will really help you develop a good answer in this space. Are there any questions about this example document? I know that we did go through it very quickly, but we can spend a bit of time talking through it if there's anything that pops up immediately. Awesome, cool. Well, that's up on Moodle. Take the time to go through it in a bit more detail, and feel free to send me an email if you do have questions about sort of some of the ideas that are expressed there. And as I said, don't worry too much about the detail of the legal content, because we'll be talking through those ideas in the coming weeks. But more the sort of the general skills and underpinnings are what's important for now. Let's move on to the second question, which again is thinking about facts. Facts are fundamental to good legal reasoning, but not all facts are equally important. How do you decide which facts are relevant? So how do you decide which facts are what's going to be really important? And how do you avoid, as Tammy was saying, getting distracted by facts that are a bit more unreliable or that might lead you astray?
Maybe going back to the legal issue, what outcome are you trying to achieve, or what problem are you trying to solve?
Yep. Yeah. I really like that phrasing. What problem are you trying to solve? Will really help sort of focus your thinking in this space. Absolutely. Yep. Any other ideas? How would you, so yeah, obviously thinking about the issues and the problems that you're trying to solve is important, but how do you arrive at that point? How do you know what issues you're trying to solve?
That would go back to the client interviewing process. I would have thought you're trying to extract the facts from the client, and obviously through that process they will have an idea or a goal of what they are trying to achieve out of it. So you would put a lot of emphasis on that initial fact extraction.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about the client interview or whichever kind of means you're getting these facts from, that's going to be important. And it also leads us into a bit of a consideration about and sort of the question I would pose to you guys is, are the facts that you think are important the same as what the client thinks are important? Or is there scope for a difference of opinion on that matter?
I would think that would vary depending on the actual person. I mean, some people are able to give their facts quite succinctly. Others think that they are giving you what they believe are important, but obviously it has no legal scope. So those facts are not relevant.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It looked like you were going to weigh in as well, Natalie.
Yeah, I was just going to say that what you find is the information or the facts can be open to interpretation. So you might have a different interpretation compared to what the client might have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're both spot on. And I think that really alerts us to kind of two sides to this, right? On the one hand, not just taking things at face value, not just sort of, running with the client's sort of version of what's important, and to fall back on your legal knowledge to think, okay, I haven't quite got the information that I need here. What are the other facts that I haven't been told that, the client thinks is some unimportant detail, but that actually might be the key to working out what's gone on, or making the case, whatever it is. But then on the flip side, not always just assuming that you know best either. Being open to and sort of being able to recognize that, we've got our own perspectives, we bring our own interpretations to these facts, and that might not always be the, I don't want to get too philosophical thinking about, relative truth and things like that, but accepting that your interpretation might not align with, one, the way the client sees it, but two, the client's expectations for what goes on, how to proceed, and being able to recognize that, okay, yes, the client has told us these facts, this leads us to this particular legal issue or whatever, but if that points you towards, okay, well, we need to sue the other party, but the client doesn't want that. They want to maintain this business relationship. They don't want to get into a messy legal dispute, things like that. Then you have to be open to the facts that the client has given you about the importance of this relationship and things like that. Being alert to those facts to recognize that, okay, maybe that's not the best approach in this particular scenario or whatever. Any other thoughts about?
I've got a quick one. Would it also be what you've actually been retained to do? So, for example, there might be other sort of facts that stem on from the issue that's at hand, but it might not be with what you've been retained to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, kind of thinking about, the client might mention something else, and you, because of your background knowledge, that sends off a little alarm bell or something, and you might briefly mention it, but yeah, being able to recognize, no, that's not what the focus is here, that's not what I'm being asked to do. I need to be able to put that to one side. Yeah, absolutely, that can help sort of direct your focus and your thinking. Yeah. Other thoughts?
Is it also important to maintain, I guess, or realize that at the end of the day, it is actually the client's facts, and they are their facts. You can't kind of misconstrue their facts. Like the facts of the situation that has actually occurred are their facts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, it's sort of, what's, it sort of has the potential to lead us down a discussion about, what's true, whose version of events is right and stuff. And, to some degree, that's really, a bit beyond what we're doing here. But at the same time, it's important to be alert to it that, some people, they do have the version of events or their interpretation of the facts in their mind is exactly what it is, and they might have trouble seeing things in a different way. But also, it's also important as legal officers of the court, ultimately, that you're not deliberately misconstruing facts to mislead the court just for for the gain of your client or anything like that. So there's that element too that's important. I think the other thing that we've sort of touched on a little bit, but is worth sort of thinking about a bit more directly, is that having a really solid knowledge and understanding of the law is going to drive your understanding of what facts are important as well. And I know I've been saying facts are critical. Don't worry about the law, but it's about thinking about the facts as what's really important. But it's having that background knowledge and understanding to help drive that initial reading of the facts. And so this is why I'm sort of saying the really important sort of strategy for doing well in this unit and beyond is to make sure that you've already got that solid knowledge base before you go into reading the factual scenario. Obviously, before you go into a client interview or something like that, you want to know a bit more of the background of the law first, because that will give you that initial kind of, it just gives you a gist of, okay, broadly, what might be the issues that are important. You meet the client and they talk about, oh, I had this car and I let my friend borrow it and this happened. You've got the background knowledge there to think about, oh, sounds like borrowing. Sounds like there might be a bailment there. And then you go from there. But it's having that basis knowledge first that allows you to let the facts take priority in that particular instance. So really important to stay on top of your studies throughout this unit so that you've got that base factual, you can let the facts guide you later on because you've got the foundational knowledge there, and it doesn't work the other way. It's a lot harder to wait until the assessment's released, read the facts, and then go, oh, well, if I need to know about bailments, I'll just look it up once I read the problem. If you don't have that foundational knowledge there, you might not know to look for the bailment stuff. So make sure you got that foundational knowledge first, and that will empower you to let the facts take center stage in a particular scenario, problem, client down the track. The other thing for a bit more sort of, I suppose, strategically in relation to assessment is to sort of ask yourself, why am I being told this information, right? When we write these tutorial problems, when we write these assessment problems, we have control over the facts that you get, but we don't want to waste our time developing complex factual scenarios that have no bearing on what you're being assessed. And likewise, you guys have got things to do. We don't want to give you more reading and thinking than you need to get the job kind of done. So something that can help you from an assessment perspective is to think, okay, well, why have I been told this? There must be something of relevance or use here that I need to think about. And I will say, straight up from the outset, I am not in the game to sort of trick you. I don't put red herring facts in or things like that. I know that so, and I'm, I don't think it's anyone at CQU. It's more other places that I've worked at. I know that some people do deliberately put red herrings in the facts just to, see who's paying attention and see who really knows their stuff. But that's not what I'm here to do. So if you read something, it's in there for a reason. And it's worth just asking yourself, okay, why have I been told this? Why is this fact included? That probably takes us to the end of question 2, unless there's any other final questions or comments on that one. Fantastic. Okay, well, let's move on to the third and final question for this week. What makes a good problem solver? We spent a bit of time in the study guide thinking about, the role of lawyers and of legal diagnosis as ultimately having the objective of solving problems. But what do you think makes a good problem solver?
Critical analysis or critical thinking around the actual facts and the legal issues.
Yep, absolutely. You know, I've spent a lot of time this evening saying how important critical skills are. So yeah, 100%, I agree that, you know, being able to think critically and give a nuanced and critical application of the law to the facts is vital to solving problems, obviously. Yep. What else?
I think it comes back to Amy's earlier point where you're trying to ascertain from the client what their outcome is and tying your problem solving back to that each time. So what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve here?
Yep.
And keep on hooking everything back to that.
Yeah. So sort of breaking it down in terms of, you know, in order to be a good problem solver, you first have to be good at knowing or hearing from the client what the problem is. You know, what are we trying to solve? And that is in a skill in itself. You know, it's easy to jump the gun a bit and think, you know, you don't pay careful enough attention to the facts or whatever, and you think, okay, well, this is the problem and this is where we're at. But really, if you take a step back, you realize, you know, there might be a problem, but it's not the most important problem that the client needs solved. Absolutely. Yep. What else?
Maybe what their desired outcome is. So what you know, what are we actually trying to, what's the end goal?
Yep. Absolutely. And you know, if we think about problem solving, we need to break that down to have a good understanding of what the problem is. We also need to have a good understanding of what the solution or what the solve is, and being able to be open to the fact that that's not the same for everyone. There might not be sort of a one size fits all solution. We need to be able to be a bit flexible, a bit open to the possibility that, yeah, there might be different solutions. And a great problem solver, obviously, is one that can identify those different solutions, give advice about those different solutions, and help the client make an informed decision about, you know, how they're going to solve that problem. What else?
I think also to, as alluding back to what you said earlier, to consider the opposing party's potential outcome or their potential gain so that you can be ready or have an answer if that's required.
Yep, absolutely. I think that falls under a broad umbrella that I would sort of call creativity, in terms of, obviously there's a bit more breadth to that in terms of creative skills in problem solving can mean a whole range of things, but part of that, yeah, absolutely, is being able to think outside the box and think not only about what your angle is and what your desired outcome is, but what's the other party looking to get out of this? Where are they at? What are they going to be thinking? What arguments are they going to run? All that sort of stuff. And that, you know, can require a bit of creativity, to put yourself in those other shoes and think about things from a different angle. It's a really good point. What else? I'd probably more than anything, and you know, you're more than welcome to have a different opinion on this, but I think what it comes down to, and the idea that links all these different very good answers, is being understanding, sort of having a good understanding of the law, so kind of a knowledge-based understanding, but being able to understand your client, where they're coming from, both in terms of thinking about, okay, what's the problem that they want solved and how would they like it solved, or what solutions are better for them. Being able to understand the other party, think about where they're coming from, think about what they see the problem as and what they see the solutions as. Understanding, I think, really draws a lot of these ideas together, and ultimately I would argue that a good problem solver is an understanding problem solver. But you're welcome to have a different opinion there, and I'd be interested to see if you agree with the claim that that's the most important skill or idea behind problem solving.
I think in a real life.
Sorry, Tim, you go.
I was just going to say, in a real life, environment where you actually do have a client, if you don't have that sort of empathy or that sort of understanding of the client right from day dot, then the relationship is not going to work the way that it could.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. What were you going to say, Natalie?
Exactly what Tam said, empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, empathy, obviously, as a sort of a subcomponent of understanding, is really important. And it's interesting, and I think really great, the mention about the relationship and how important that is, right? There's a reason why we start the first half of this unit thinking about relationships and different kinds of legal relationships between Bailey and Baylor, between agent and principal, and all these different relationships that we look at. But core to all that is the relationship between lawyer and client as well, obviously. And yeah, being able to solve problems with a view to this relationship, with a view to building rapport and trust and all those sort of ideas as well, of course, is going to be the foundation to that. But it then flows into this kind of filler method as well, right? If you have an understanding, if you are looking to build trust and take an empathetic approach to the relationship, that's how you get the facts that you need. That's how you develop those critical applications. Obviously, this is more, in practice rather than specific to this unit, but we're building the foundations and the skills here, building your knowledge, your understanding in that sense, but also, your understanding of different approaches, creative thinking, all that sort of stuff, so that you've got all those skills down pat, because that's what will help you develop those strong and trusting relationships with clients to help them solve their problems. Any other sort of thoughts or comments there? I suppose moving forward, then that takes us to the end of the tutorial questions for this week. Obviously, in future weeks, we are a bit more doctrinal, looking at hypothetical problems and scenarios and all that sort of great stuff, preparing you for the assessments. But I did want to sort of wrap up this evening with a brief discussion or question about what some of your expectations might be for this unit going forward. Obviously, I view these tutorials as a really good opportunity to prepare you for the assessment, and that's 100% what we're going to be doing. But there is scope to do other things as well. And so I'm interested to hear whether, especially, having heard that we're all close to finishing, starting to think about, where we go from here. Are there other things that you would like to get out of this unit and this tutorial that we can think about, these tutorials, I should say, that we can think about adding to in coming weeks?
I think from my perspective, I'd like to just see how the next couple of weeks go. And I think by that stage, I'll have sort of a more of an idea of what it is that I'm trying to get out of this unit.
Yeah.
So for me,
absolutely.
I think it's probably a little bit too early for me to sort of gauge that just yet.
Yeah, of course. No, that's absolutely fair enough. And yeah, maybe. So in week 6, we have, so you do the first assessment. Because it's a small course, I mark it really quickly, and then you get the results back before the week 6 tutorial. And in week 6, we have a chat about the first assessment, strategies that you used that worked or didn't work. I give some sort of general feedback about, things that were done well and could have been improved and stuff. Maybe that's a good chance to also have a bit of a pause and think about broadly, where are we in this unit and where would we like to go for the rest of the unit? Having completed one bit of assessment, what more did you feel like you could have benefited from and used and things like that? That might be a good chance to take stock. So I'll make a note of that, to definitely ask again in week 6 whether there's sort of anything else that you'd like to get out of the unit. But if there are things that you think of in the meantime, please do feel free to send me an email or to raise them in the tutorials, and we definitely look at building that in. Right, there's room for flexibility in the unit. It's a close to final elective, and it's we're sort of, you're treated accordingly in terms of having a bit more agency in how the study proceeds. So absolutely open to suggestions and things that you'd like to get out as we move forward. A very brief note for people who are listening to this recording and who intend to listen to recordings in coming weeks. The best way to get these recordings quickly and early is to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I upload these overnight, and so first thing Friday morning, they're up on YouTube. It can take a little while for it to port across into Moodle. So if for your study and things like that, you need access to it Friday morning, best place is to go direct to YouTube, not to wait for it to be uploaded onto Moodle, because it can take a little bit longer. But invariably it's up by Friday afternoon on Moodle as well. But that doesn't apply to you guys because you guys are here and participating already. So that's fantastic. Thank you all so much for coming along this evening. Look forward to seeing you again next week when we talk about bailment, which is a nice, relatively easy topic to start things off in terms of the substantive content. So we ease into things a little bit for this unit. So have a great week. I'll see you all next Thursday. Bye.